Spokane police say they've solved a 40-year-old cold case murder and arrested the suspect.
In 1982, Spokane businessman Archie Rutherford was murdered inside his South Hill home.
On May 25, 1982, just before 5 p.m., 58-year-old Archie Rutherford was found by his wife, beaten and stabbed to death in his home in Spokane. The news of the murder threw his city into chaos, and fear gripped the hearts of many. So, why was Archie killed, and who exactly was his killer? Welcome back to Mysterious Hook. Today, we are looking at a 40-year-old cold case finally solved in 2022. Without any further ado, let's walk on the edge of the mystery. This case will take us to Spokane, a city that sits to the far east of Washington and holds the record for being the second largest city in the state. Spokane was once home to a native tribe, but has since evolved into a bustling, industrialized town. The city's beautiful landscapes are perfect for a wide range of outdoor activities, including downhill skating, mountain biking, and much more. Archie Rutherford was born in 1924 in Montana, but spent most of his life in Spokane. It was in Spokane that he met his wife, Eleanor. In 1948, Archie and Eleanor became parents for the first time when they welcomed their son, Stanley, into the world. At the time, their joy knew no bounds. Archie had a passion for art, especially stage plays. This burning desire for theatrical performance drove him to join the Spokane Civic Theater, a nonprofit theater that was established in 1947. His artistic brilliance paved the way for him in the establishment, and he quickly rose to the rank of a theater director. This position offered him the opportunity to direct several plays. In addition to being active with the Spokane Civic Center, Archie also worked as a night clerk at the Tradeswinds Motor Hotel in Spokane. From time to time, he also monitored a drive-in restaurant jointly owned by him and other family members. Archie's wife, Eleanor, was 6 years older than him. Like her husband, she was active in Spokane's art scene. She helped organize music and art festivals. Besides this, she was involved in several philanthropic works, and this made her quite popular in the city. In particular, she worked as a writer for a popular newspaper in the city, the Spokesman Review. Eleanor loved her job, and everyone she worked with had only good things to say about her. Archie was supportive of his wife, and together they lived a very peaceful and contented life in the city. By the early 1980s, Archie was in his late 50s, and Eleanor was a few years shy of clocking 65. It seemed to the couple that life would continue at such a pleasant pace for a long time. But they were wrong. None of them had any idea that a horrible, life-changing incident would soon occur. On May 22, 1982, Eleanor took a trip to Seattle. She had been planning it for a while, and when the day arrived, Eleanor said goodbye to Archie. She had no idea this was the last time she would see him alive. On her second day in Seattle, she started to worry. Archie had not tried reaching out to her to ask how she was. By May 25th, she was done with her business in Seattle, and that afternoon, she had her flight back to Spokane. She had different thoughts while on the plane. Most of them were centered on Archie. She wondered why she had not heard from him for days. It was quite unusual, and she was deeply troubled by it. These thoughts troubled her till she landed in Spokane. Upon disembarking, she expected to see Archie waiting for her. They had planned that he would pick her up at the airport. But when she looked around, she realized he was nowhere to be found. At that point, she began to panic. She thought that perhaps he had encountered something that had delayed him, so she decided to wait a while. The more she waited, the more anxious she became. When she could no longer bear the uncertainty, she made arrangements with a close friend to pick her up and take her home. As the car that took her home pulled up to her house, she noticed that her green 1979 Honda was not in the driveway where it was usually parked. The absence of the car meant that her husband was not at home, which puzzled her. She got out of her friend's car and headed towards the house. Something else caught her attention. On the front porch were piles of newspapers that someone had dumped there. In addition to this, a towel had also been carelessly thrown beside the newspapers. All of these things seemed odd to Eleanor. She could not make sense of what she was seeing. Much to her surprise, when she tried the door, she discovered it was unlocked. Did this mean that Archie was at home, or had he forgotten to lock the door before leaving the house? At that point, she did not know what to think. As she stepped into the silent house, she knew something was terribly wrong. The mess that had been outside the front door was nothing compared to what waited for her inside the house. The house was nothing short of chaotic, and things were all over the place. Steak knives from the kitchen drawer were scattered on the dining room table, and a colored television that was always in plain sight was missing. She took all of this disorder in at a glance and slowly made her way to the bedroom. As she opened the bedroom door, nothing prepared her for what she saw. Archie was lying motionless and naked on the bed. A television set was lying on the bed near his head, and its cord was wrapped around his neck. Archie's head and neck were bloodied, and blood covered the bed on which he lay. The wall of the room was also splattered with it. In addition to this, pieces of broken glass were visible near his head. There was no visible sign that he was breathing, and Eleanor hoped that somehow he would still be alive. But a part of her knew that there was no way he could have survived whatever had been done to him. She managed to calm herself enough to call the police and tell them what had happened. In a matter of minutes, the wailing of sirens filled the air as detectives from the Spokane Police Department made their way to Eleanor and Archie's house. When they arrived at the scene, a distressed-looking Eleanor opened the door and led them to where her husband was. Even the detectives were shocked by the brutality of the scene. They were unable to immediately determine that Archie was dead. Without wasting much time, the detectives set to work. They began to collect evidence that would be of help to their investigation. While examining Archie's body, one of the detectives noticed cuts behind his left fingers and forearm. These injuries were believed to have been inflicted when he tried to protect himself from whoever killed him. More pieces of broken glass were under his back when his body was moved. But that was not all. A piece of cast iron was also found under his body, and another was on the bedroom floor. The frying pan from which these iron pieces had broken off was later discovered sitting on a stove in the kitchen. When the pan was examined, strands of hair and blood were found on it. Detectives believed Archie's killer had used it as a weapon, so they collected it as evidence. When the detectives checked the kitchen, they noticed a bloody knife in plain sight. There were also bottles of whiskey strewn across the floor of the kitchen. In the bathroom, they found cigarette butts and ash discarded inside the toilet. Soon after, detectives completed a thorough sweep of the house, and Archie's body was moved to the hospital for an autopsy. From their findings, detectives had cause to believe that robbery was likely the motive for the murder. They believed this because Eleanor revealed that several items were also missing from the house, in addition to her car. The missing items included some of her jewelry, house keys, and Archie's wallet, in which he kept several of his credit cards. Detectives knew they needed to find Eleanor's car as soon as possible. They knew finding the vehicle was vital, since it would likely lead them closer to the truth. Information about the car was soon released to the public. Archie's autopsy results came in the following day. They revealed that he had been stabbed multiple times in the head and neck. An object had also been used to violently hit him on the head, resulting in a fractured skull and internal bleeding. Detectives believed that the frying pan found in the kitchen was used to cause this damage. Rutherford was likely knocked unconscious by a blow to the head before he was repeatedly stabbed to the left side of the head and neck, Spokane County Coroner Lois Shanks told the media at the time of the murder. The possibility of Archie being asleep when he was attacked was not ruled out. Friends of Archie and Eleanor were deeply saddened when they heard the tragic news. They visited Eleanor to mourn with her and also to comfort her. It was a difficult time for Eleanor, and she needed all the emotional support she could get. Simultaneously, the detectives were hard at work trying to solve the case. To help the detectives in their investigation, several people who had seen Archie hours before his death came forward to say what they knew. A friend of Archie, whose name was not disclosed, told detectives that he and Archie had had breakfast together on May 24th at a restaurant known as The Shack. The friend also revealed that he later saw Archie at work on the night of the same day. A police officer also reported that he had seen Archie that same night, driving the missing Honda. As for the stolen car, it did not take long for it to surface. It was found the next day at a car dealership, which was about 4 miles from where the murder had occurred. Detectives immediately examined the vehicle and found a fingerprint that did not belong to Eleanor or Archie. This discovery excited the detectives, who felt closer to solving the crime. The fingerprint was immediately submitted for analysis, but after several days of cross-checking it against the database, no match was found. This was something detectives had not expected, and they were left disappointed. They had the fingerprint of an unknown person who was most likely the killer, and they could not identify him. It was a frustrating time for them. After this, the pace of the investigation began to slow down, and it seemed as if Archie's killer had vanished into thin air. Days soon turned into weeks, and detectives made little to no progress with the investigation. However, when they least expected it, an incident occurred that allowed the investigation to pick up pace once again. Some of Archie's credit cards that had been reported missing suddenly turned up a few weeks after the murder in Kalispell, a city located northwest of Montana, about a 4-hour drive from Spokane. According to the police, one evening, 2 men had strolled casually into a radio station in Kalispell. They looked respectable, and no one seeing them would have thought that they were up to no good. The 2 men quickly made friends with workers at the radio station and were allowed to stay the night. This turned out to be a terrible decision because the 2 men had vanished the following day. Employees of the radio station did not give much thought to this until they discovered that some vital items in the radio station had also vanished along with the 2 men. It was then that they realized that the 2 men had been thieves. The incident was reported to the police, who took time to carry out an investigation. During the investigation, it was discovered that the 2 thieves had used Archie's credit card the night they arrived at the radio station. It was a significant discovery, and police knew that apprehending one or both thieves would lead them closer to solving Archie's murder case. However, they could not do much because they did not have the name of either of the 2 thieves. None of the employees at the radio station knew their names. Detectives did not have to wait too long for the name of one of the thieves to become known. This happened due to a random phone call Eleanor received from a stranger a few weeks later. During that phone call, the stranger identified himself as Bob Neville, and much to Eleanor's surprise, he had told her he had one of Archie's credit cards. Bob was soon found and interviewed by the police. During the interview, he revealed that a man called Jerry Provost had given the credit card to him. According to Bob, he had met Jerry in Spokane, and they had struck a deal. The deal was that he would drive Jerry to the state of Idaho in exchange for some cash. However, for some reason, they had gone to Montana instead. They had also picked up a local disc jockey along the way. Bob told police that he dropped Jerry off at Polson, Montana, and that was the last he saw of him. With this information out in the open, detectives knew exactly who they were looking for. A manhunt for Jerry began. Unexpectedly, Jerry turned himself into the police. When he was interviewed and asked about the credit cards, he confessed that he had gotten them from 2 black men. Nothing ever came out of this confession because the identity of the 2 men remained a mystery. Soon after this series of incidents, the investigation died down due to a lack of leads, and the case went cold. It would remain like this for many years. On August 18, 1996, Eleanor sadly passed away at the age of 78, without ever finding out who murdered her husband. Years passed, and most of Spokane's inhabitants soon forgot about Archie's murder. But the detectives of the city's police department never forgot. From time to time, the case was revisited, but no progress was made. Then, in October 2020, the case took a positive turn. A match was found for the fingerprint that had been lifted from Eleanor's Honda all those years ago. Detectives could not believe their eyes. The fingerprints belonged to a man by the name of Tracy Pruitt. The discovery was remarkable, but detectives knew they needed something more solid to be sure if Tracy was indeed the man they had been looking for. Due to this, they decided to take another look at the evidence that had been taken from the scene of the murder. The evidence they had were swabs of blood drops that had been obtained from the kitchen of the house the murder took place. There were also swabs that had been taken from Archie's body. All of these were submitted for forensic analysis. Soon enough, the results were out. There was a match from the DNA from the blood drops, and it was none other than Tracy. It was the final piece of the puzzle, and detectives knew they finally had their man. Tracy was not a stranger to the police. He had been involved in several criminal activities in the past, and had even spent several years in prison for one of his crimes. In the same year that Archie was murdered, 2 women had accused Tracy of sexually assaulting them. He was arrested in Ohio for charges relating to the crime, and received about 50 years of jail time after pleading guilty to rape and aggravated assault. However, he spent only 27 years in prison and was then released. After he gained his freedom, he settled in California, where he lived an everyday life. But authorities kept a close watch on him due to his criminal past. On October 27, 2022, Tracy woke up not knowing he would be back behind bars before the end of the day. He was arrested in Los Angeles by Spokane police detectives, who also received help from the Los Angeles Police Department. After this, he was charged with first-degree murder and second-degree robbery. In addition to this, his bond was set at $1 million. At the moment, Tracy remains in custody in a jail in California, but he will soon be moved to Spokane to answer for his crimes. It took 40 years for Archie's murder to be solved, and sadly, in those years, many of his relatives and friends passed away, not knowing who killed him. There are thousands of cold cases out there that might never get solved, and even if they do, the families and friends of the victims might not be around to witness the breakthrough in the cases. So, do you think the law enforcement agents are doing enough to solve the staggering number of cold cases on their hands? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section. And don't forget to like, share, and hit the subscribe button. For now, stay safe and keep watching Mysterious Hook for more mysterious content like this.